Hey students, my name is Erica and I'm from our Findlay campus. This month we're talking about injustice, which we've defined as things in our world that are not right, unfair, or unequal. It's painful to experience injustice, and it makes us ask the question, why doesn't somebody do something? It's even worse when injustice is ongoing, systematic, and constant. God sees and cares about what's happening, and He is all about justice. Part of following Jesus means we care about the things He cares about enough to do something, including injustice. Maybe you hear this and think, that's great, but what about me? If you've been a victim of injustice like racism, oppression, discrimination, or prejudice, then you know how that feels. If you felt that way, you may be wondering, how do I handle injustice when it's happening to me, not just around me? Or maybe others of you are thinking, that's not me, that's not my story. I get that too. But as a family, when one of us suffers, we all suffer. And it's an important opportunity for you to hear and understand what injustice feels like when one of your families experience it. That's why I want to challenge you to lean in and practice what we've talked about in our first week. Be curious. Facing injustice leaves us feeling confused, isolated, and alone. But we're not the first to face injustice. In fact, injustice has been around almost as long as humanity itself. A long time ago, there was a king named Nebuchadnezzar who was very powerful. His nation, Babylon, had conquered and captured God's people, the Israelites. One day, he built a giant golden statue that stood 90 feet tall and ordered everyone to bow down to worship the statue whenever they heard certain music playing. If they chose not to do as ordered, they would be thrown into a blazing fire. The Bible tells us that there were 3 Jewish men named Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego who were worshipers of God and refused to bow down to the statue. The king wasn't thrilled by this news, and he ordered Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego to be brought to him. He gave them one more chance to bow down and worship the statue when the music played, or they would be thrown into the fire. But these 3 men stood their ground. They believed that God could rescue them. Even if He didn't, they didn't want to turn from their devotion to Him. What an incredible example of courage and faith. So of course, the king, in full rage mode now, and orders the fire to be burned 7 times hotter than usual. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were tied up and thrown into the fire. The furnace was so hot, the soldiers who threw the men into the fire died simply from being near the flames. Now look, I get none of us have been thrown into fires recently, but I think we can agree this feels unfair. And many of us know what it feels like to be treated unfairly. Some of us have been discriminated against for our skin color, treated like we are less than because of our family's finances, held back because of our gender, or considered less important because of something we have absolutely no control over. And if you've experienced injustice like this, you know it can be scary, frustrating, and sad. These guys probably felt the same way. They were treated unfairly and about to face literal fire, not because they did anything wrong, but because they followed God. Talk about injustice. As the story continues, the 3 men are thrown into the fire, but watch what happens in Daniel 3:24 through 27. Then King Nebuchadnezzar leaped to his feet in amazement and asked his advisors, "Weren't there 3 men that we tied up and threw in the fire?" They replied, "Certainly, Your Majesty." He said, "Look, I see 4 men walking around the fire unbound and unharmed, and the 4th looks like the Son of God's." Nebuchadnezzar then approached the opening of the blazing furnace and shouted, "Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, servants of the Most High God, come out, come here." So Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego came out of the fire, and the governors and royal advisors crowded around them. They saw that the fire had not harmed their bodies, nor their hair, nor their robes, and there was no smell of fire on them. Now, many Bible scholars and researchers have opinions about this story and who was the 4th man in the fire. Was he God? Was he Jesus? Was it an angel or someone else? I don't know the answer. But One thing is clear: in that moment of extreme injustice, they were not alone. God did not abandon them or leave them to suffer on their own. And in the same way, you are never alone when you face injustice. Let that sink in. When you experience injustice, you don't have to face it alone. God cared about Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and made sure they weren't alone in their suffering in injustice. Did things change eventually? Yes. Did the laws change as a result of the injustice? Yes. But don't miss what happened even while the suffering was going on. God cared for them. And in the same way, God cares about you and doesn't want you to be alone when you face injustice. Maybe you hear this story and you feel the injustice part. Maybe you're so tired, so hurt, so burned by the things you've experienced that you don't know where to turn. I want you to know that you don't have to be alone. God is with you. He hears you. If you're processing that for the first time or don't know what to do next, here are some steps for you to consider. Talk to Jesus. He cares even more than you realize. Share with him your feelings of frustration, confusion, or hurt. Remind yourself over and over that you are not alone. Remember that he will send others to be with you. Talk to your small group leader or trusted friends about what you faced. Even if you think they won't understand, keep talking until someone does. Consider talking to your family about getting help from a professional counselor or a mentor who can help you process the injustice you experienced and begin to heal. Keep moving in the midst of the injustice. The guys in the fire didn't give up. Sure, you shouldn't have to do anything about injustice that's facing you. Others should step up. It's unfair. That's all true. But at the same time, doing nothing isn't always helpful. So keep moving. Some of you, however, may have heard the story and thought, I haven't really experienced injustice. Does that mean I'm like the evil king who caused the injustice? Maybe, or maybe not. Or perhaps it makes you like the people in the crowd who just stood and watched while all this was happening. We all participate in injustice in some way, often by allowing it to happen while we watch. Maybe you didn't throw somebody in the fire, but maybe you laughed along when you heard a racist joke, or watched people get bullied but didn't say anything, or listen to music that's degrading to women. If that's you, I want you to know you can talk to God about that too. In Psalms 139, the writer shares a beautiful way to pray to God to open our eyes to our wrongdoings. He says, "Search me, O God, and know my anxious thoughts. Point out anything in me that offends you, and lead me along the path of everlasting life." That's Psalms 139, 23 and 24. Start there. Ask God to help you see ways that you've participated in injustice. This is so important because the truth is, some of the people you care about the most have been on the receiving end of injustice. Maybe for the first time, you'll see it differently and you care differently because you know how it affects them. Let it become personal for you. When injustice happens, it's painful, but you don't have to do something alone. Not only is God with you, but so are the people in your small group. That's why we have small groups. We want you to have a group of people who are for you. We want you to have a group of people who will listen to you, who are praying with you and learning from you and cheering for you. If you've experienced injustice, think about how you can let the group know that you need support. If you haven't experienced injustice, think about how you can listen and genuinely care for someone in your group. This may sound like a lot right now. I get it. Even if you don't talk to your whole group tonight, I hope you'll talk to your leader. They signed up to do this because they want to be here for you. And maybe today they can be a real human reminder that when you experience injustice, you don't have to face it alone.